And welcome to another edition of our treatment of the International Sunday School lesson. Today's lesson is entitled, Our Rescuing God. And it's taken from Psalms, the 91st chapter, verses 1 through 8, and 91st chapter, verses 11 through 16. And today's lesson is for February the 24th, 2019, winter quarter, lesson number 13. Now, a little background information as we have been talking about the last couple of weeks with when we were dealing with the other Psalms. The book of Psalms, of course, is a book of songs that are in the Old Testament, and they are based on, they're written in Hebrew poetry, which has a lot of what's called parallelism, where it says one thing, then turns around and says the same thing again in a different way. The Psalms were created, God gave those Psalms. Originally, they were songs that were sung in the temple, and there was a section of the priests who were charged with being the musicians and the singers associated with the temple, and so they would be the ones in charge of singing these psalms. And again, let me reiterate, especially as important as music has been to me over the course of my life, let me make sure that I reiterate something I've said before, is that music has a very important place in the house of God. I believe that proper music holds the same place and purpose as actual preaching holds, because you should be singing, what you sing should be just as true as what is preached behind the pulpit, and just as pertinent as the things that are preached behind the pulpit. We do not need trite, uninformed pieces of music sang inside the house of God. The music that is sang inside the house of God should be extremely theologically sound and should make a very pertinent, important point in people's lives. Just as much as what is preached behind the pulpit. So I would encourage, with everything in me, I would encourage the musicians, the songwriters, the choir directors, the worship leaders, the singers, everyone involved in gospel music to put a lot of thought and prayer in what they throw out there for people. And the time you take inside the house of God singing to people and having people sing along with you is just as important as what the preacher is preaching and what comes out behind the pulpit. And God will hold you accountable for what you sing in your music. So put a lot of prayer into it, put a lot of thought, and put a lot of study into it. Okay? And today's psalm is talking about how that the Lord looks out after us. Okay? Psalms 91:1. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. So we see this imagery of the Christian, this imagery of the Christian hanging on to the Lord's coattails. Now, I'm not going to go into who it was, but someone who I watched grow up, they would, anytime they felt insecure or in a place to where they were uncomfortable, would seek out their mother and always turn into their mother and more or less be under the shadow of their mother. And when I read this verse, I have a picture of us doing the same thing with the Lord. Of when we are in dire straits, when things are not going as comfortable as we think that they should or they would or they could, of turning in and being and hanging on to the coattails of the Lord and being underneath His shadow, that shadow of His protection. Okay? Now, verse 2 through 4. I will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust. For He will deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with His pinions, and under His wings you will take refuge. His faithfulness is a shield and a buckler. So we have all of these imagery of how the Lord is our protection. Okay? We have this imagery of God being our fortress. And you always see, when you look back on these movies of during the time of castles and stuff, the army would be out there and the other army would attack, and if they were too powerful and everything, everybody'd hightail it back to the castle, and they would go back to their refuge, to their fortress, where they were safe. And that's how we can be when times of trouble come, where we go back into our fortress, our God, whom we trust. And then there's also this imagery of the fowler. Now, what a fowler is someone who is a bird hunter. And they have these traps they set out there to catch these birds. And the devil, and sometimes not even the devil, but people with evil intent will set these snares out for the Christian to try to trap them into something. And the Lord will deliver us from those snares, from those traps that the devil or people of evil intent have laid out for us. And then think of the imagery of the bird and the little chicks. How that during a rainstorm, maybe the chicks don't have a whole lot of feathers on them and everything. How that mama bird will throw out its wings and get those little chicks underneath its wings to protect those chicks from the cold and the wet and the grunge that is in the air at the time. And that's how the Lord does us a lot of times. Okay? Now, 5 through 6. You will not fear the terror of the night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in darkness, nor the destruction that wastes at noonday. Now, let me tell you something about fear. The Bible talks about how that perfect love casts out fear. Fear is a debilitating emotion. Some fear is a little bit of anxiety, in the moment of a crisis. That's why God gave it to us. It's a way for our emotions to throw out adrenaline. It gives us some extra strength, some little extra speed, makes our consciousness of time change a little bit. But that's only for very short periods of time that's really useful. If you have protracted fear over a long period of time, it has a very destructive force in your life. And sometimes an unreasonable fear will keep you from actually functioning correctly. I know that, as some of y'all know, for a period of about 5 years, I taught Taekwondo for the local parks department. And I didn't have like thousands of students, but I had several, over the course of the 5 years I taught, I had probably a couple of hundred students, and most of them were young. And one of the things that I am 100% sure of, that when you're teaching kids how to spar and do that kind of thing, you got to get them where they are not terrified of getting tapped in the nose or something like that. Because if they get really afraid and overly afraid, it causes them not to function well. And that's one of the things that we need to do, is to pray for the Lord to help us with unreasonable fear, prolonged fear. Those are the two things that we need to concentrate on, of trying to pray out of our life, to pray out of our existence. Unreasonable fear and prolonged fear. If you go through life with terror at a particular thing, and it just causes you to be miserable and that kind of thing, that is a very unhealthy emotion in your life, and you need to pray and get victory over that. And also, too, if you have an unreasonable fear, like a phobia, you need to pray and maybe possibly talk to somebody to help get that resolved, where you don't have that unreasonable fear about this thing, because it will make you miserable and it will cause you to make decisions that are not the wisest decisions to make. And it's not in God's plan for you to suffer like that. Now, like I said, a certain amount of wisdom is appropriate. God don't want you to take foolish chances. And I'm not saying that, and God's not telling you that. God does not want you to go do stupid things, then just not, to not take reasonable precautions. God wants you to take reasonable precautions. If you'll remember back to the temptation of Christ, when Satan said, "Go ahead and jump down off of this pinnacle here," and actually quoted this particular psalm, that he'll give his angels charge concerning you. And Jesus said you shouldn't tempt God. So don't be tempting God. That's not what I'm talking about here. That's not what the Bible is talking here about when it talks about how perfect love casteth out fear. And the verses here, they're talking about overcoming fear. That's not what this is talking about. You do need to be wise. You do need to take reasonable precautions and that kind of thing. Just don't let the devil destroy your life and cause you to suffer over an unreasonable paranoia. Okay? Now, continuing on, 7th and 8th verse. 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. You will only look with your eyes and see the recompense of the wicked. Now, let me be real perfectly plain about something. This verse is not guaranteeing you that you will never see trouble. That is not what this verse is saying. What this verse is saying is that we will win in the end. That is 100%, I'm 100% positive about that. Now, it may be that you'll live in a town with somebody who's sold drugs and been a pimp and everything else, and they make it through all their entire life with 3 times the amount of money that you have, and they've never seen the inside of a jail. That may very well happen. But there is coming a day, a judgment day, when the evil deeds are going to be paid back to people. And people's righteousness, where they've done the right things and stuff and lived for the Lord, that's going to be rewarded. There is going to be a payday someday. And I know I keep saying these things, quoting lines from songs, but which I guess is appropriate from what I said about the book of Psalms. But that is the absolute utter truth. There is going to be a payday someday, and we are going to win in the end. So keep that in mind. Okay. Now, 11 and 12. For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. On their hands they will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against the stone. And as I said, that is actually the verse that Satan quoted to Jesus to try to get him to jump off of that pinnacle. And just like Jesus was talking about, this is not giving you license to do stupid things. God wants you to live your life with wisdom and judgment, and to be cautious and that kind of thing. Be wise. Don't be stupid about what you do and how you conduct your business, and take care of your safety and the safety of your kids. When your kids are out, when you're out there in the parking lot with your child, especially a small child, reach down there and grab their hand. Don't let that 2-year-old kid go wandering up in the Walmart parking lot without holding your hand. Be wise. Be wise. Don't be foolish. Don't be silly. Don't be stupid. Look out after you kids. Look out after you. After each other, and look out after yourself. But there are times where miraculous things happen, where you get in a bind and there ain't nothing you could have done to avoid it, and it doesn't look like there's no way of getting out of it. And the Lord will just miraculously, He'll have His angels, and they will do something, and you will not be able to explain it, but it happened. Me and my wife and my grandkids, on a Christmas Eve, were going somewhere. And there was a 1-lane bridge. And this person come barreling down that 1-lane bridge, and I have absolutely no idea how both of those cars snuck by each other. We were on that bridge, they were on that bridge. I have no idea how we made it. But we passed by each other, and me and my wife both was praying. Now, you can believe that or not believe that, I don't care. All I know is that we didn't, I'm here, my wife's here, my grandkids are here. And they wasn't a mark on that car, either car. How it happened, I'll never know. But You know, sometimes God just reaches down. He has his angels, and they do a miraculous thing. Okay? Now, the 13th verse. You will tread on the lion and the adder, the young lion and the serpent you will trample underfoot. Now, I'm so thankful that that young man, Kaufman, that wrestled with that mountain lion out in Colorado, survived. But that's usually not how the way those encounters go. Usually, you run across a mountain lion out in the wilderness somewhere. The mountain lion's got lunch, and you got a real bad day. But this verse is talking about how God, in his mercy, will enable you to have extra strength and give you victory when things are coming at you. Okay? Now, 14 through the 16th verse. Because he holds fast to me in love, I will deliver him. I will protect him because he knows my name. When he calls to me, I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will rescue him and honor him. With long life I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. Now, going with that same theme about gospel music and songs, I cannot read those verses without thinking about that sweet old song we used to always sung at church. Hold to God's unchanging hands. There are times where you will have things will come against you. And there are times in your life when you're getting toward the end of it. And things begin to change. And the strength that you used to have, you no longer have. And the breathing that you used to have, you no longer have. And the vocal cords you used to have, you no longer have. But there is that hand. That unchanging hand of God. And no matter what happens, no matter the difficulty that you're going through, no matter the hurt that you see in the people you love around you, hold to God's unchanging hand, because everything in this world is subject to change. Our lives can change in a split second. You can get a phone call of a death that just happened that will totally change everything in your life. You can be told that your 401k is locked down and you've lost it all. The company that held it went out of business, and and everything that you had depended on is gone. But God's unchanging hand will always be there. Hold to God's unchanging hand. And as far as a concluding thought, that is my concluding thought. No matter what happens, no matter the difficulty we see in life, hold to God's unchanging hand. Well, friends, good Lord willing, I'll be with you next weekend.